There is a silent power within you that exists far beyond ordinary thought, stronger than external conditions, and more influential than effort alone. It does not force, compete, or seek attention, yet it quietly directs the course of your entire life. That power is your feeling state, not passing emotions that change throughout the day, but the deeper emotional atmosphere you consistently identify with as true. It is within this inner condition that your reality first begins to take shape. Most people move through life believing that circumstances create their emotions. They assume they will feel confident after success appears, peaceful after problems disappear, or fulfilled once life finally improves. But this way of living keeps them trapped in reaction instead of creation. The deeper truth is that feeling comes first and reality responds afterward. Your inner world is not simply reflecting your outer life, it is helping generate it. Every experience you encounter, whether positive or painful, first existed as a state of consciousness within you. You are not just watching life happen. You are participating in shaping it through the feelings you repeatedly sustain. When you imagine something deeply and emotionally experience it as real, your body and mind begin responding to that imagined reality. Your emotions shift, your energy changes, and your nervous system reacts as though the experience already exists. This is why thought by itself is limited. A thought without emotional conviction carries little creative force. Feeling energizes the idea and turns imagination into lived inner experience. The outer world reflects the states you consistently occupy. Change the inner state, and eventually the external experience changes as well. This is not fantasy or blind optimism. It is the understanding that your dominant assumptions influence how reality unfolds around you. To live in the feeling of the wish fulfilled means emotionally entering the reality you desire as though it already exists now, rather than someday in the future. If you seek success, feel the satisfaction of already achieving it. If you seek love, feel the comfort and certainty of already being loved. If you seek freedom, feel the peace and relief of already living unburdened. The mind naturally wants to ask how everything will happen, but your task is not to force the route. Your role is to embody the result inwardly. As you continue returning to that feeling, your perceptions, reactions, and behaviors slowly begin to reorganize around it. Opportunities emerge, circumstances shift, and life starts reflecting the state you accepted within yourself. Many people try changing their lives only through physical effort. They push harder, attempt to control outcomes, and obsess over external action. Yet when the internal state remains the same, old patterns eventually reappear. Trying to alter life without changing feeling is like trying to change a reflection without changing what stands before the mirror. Real transformation does not come through struggle. It comes through conscious acceptance. At first, a new emotional state may feel unfamiliar because you have spent so much time identifying with older patterns. But through repetition, the new feeling gradually becomes natural. And once it feels natural, it begins expressing itself outwardly as reality. External conditions may not immediately shift, but that does not mean nothing is occurring. Just as a seed develops underground before becoming visible, inner change unfolds before outer evidence appears. Your responsibility is not to constantly search for proof, but to remain faithful to the state you have chosen. Every moment you are selecting a state, whether consciously or unconsciously. Fear selects limitation. Gratitude selects abundance. Worry selects lack. Love selects connection. These emotional states are not passive experiences. They are creative influences shaping how you perceive, respond to, and experience life. Once you understand this, your relationship with reality changes. You stop seeing yourself as controlled by circumstances and begin recognizing your role in shaping experience. Instead of only asking what you want, you begin asking how you would feel if it were already yours. That feeling becomes the doorway to a new experience of life. Over time, a quiet confidence begins developing within you. You stop desperately chasing outcomes because you understand that the feelings you repeatedly accept as true eventually express themselves outwardly. Circumstances lose their power to completely define your inner world. You become anchored in something deeper than appearances. As awareness grows, you also become more conscious of old emotional habits. Fear, doubt, and insecurity are no longer viewed as permanent truths, but as conditioned states you once practiced repeatedly. Instead of fighting those patterns, you gently shift attention away from them and return to the feeling you prefer to embody. This gradually changes your identity itself. You no longer try to imitate confidence or fulfillment. You begin naturally feeling those qualities within, and your actions begin reflecting them effortlessly. Behavior becomes an expression of identity instead of an attempt to hide insecurity. Life then begins mirroring this transformation. Unexpected opportunities appear, relationships evolve, new paths open. Situations that once felt fixed begin changing. These experiences are not random coincidences. They reflect the state you have accepted internally. You also begin letting go of the need to constantly control life. Instead of anxiously searching for evidence, you trust the process unfolding beneath the surface. You understand there is often a delay between inner assumption and outward expression, and constantly checking for proof interrupts the natural unfolding. Desire itself begins changing meaning. Rather than reminding you of what is missing, it becomes an invitation into a new state of being. You stop endlessly longing and start embodying. From this inner shift comes something subtle but deeply transformative, a sense of stillness that cannot be manufactured through effort alone. It is not the stillness of giving up, nor the stillness of emotional numbness. It is the calm that emerges when you are no longer internally chasing life in order to feel complete. Your actions stop being fueled by desperation, fear, emptiness, or the constant need to prove yourself. Instead, they begin arising from a deeper sense of wholeness. There is a profound difference between acting from lack and acting from completeness. Most people move through life trying to earn emotional fulfillment from the outside world. They seek achievements to feel worthy, relationships to feel secure, money to feel safe, recognition to feel important, and validation to feel enough. Every action becomes tied to a hidden emotional hunger. And because the action is rooted in lack, even success often fails to satisfy them for long. A person may achieve what they once desperately wanted only to discover that the inner emptiness remains untouched. Why? Because no outer condition can permanently resolve an inner state that has never been transformed. The external achievement temporarily distracts the mind, but eventually the old feeling resurfaces because it was never truly replaced. The state remained the same. This is why some people constantly chase more success, more attention, more reassurance, more proof that they matter. Yet no matter how much they obtain, the feeling of insufficiency quietly follows them because it was never external to begin with. It existed within consciousness itself. But when you begin cultivating the feeling of already being whole, something changes fundamentally. Your relationship with action transforms. You no longer act in order to become enough. You act from the assumption that you already are enough. This alters the quality of everything you do. Your conversations change because you are no longer speaking from insecurity. Your decisions change because fear is no longer controlling every movement. Your relationships change because you stop needing others to constantly confirm your value. Even your ambitions change because they are no longer driven solely by emotional survival. Creation becomes expression instead of compensation. This creates an entirely different experience of life. You move with less internal resistance because you are no longer fighting yourself beneath the surface. Comparison begins losing its grip because your worth no longer depends on being greater than someone else. The need for constant external validation slowly weakens because your emotional identity is no longer built entirely upon outside approval. Fulfillment stops becoming something postponed into the future. Most people unconsciously live with the belief that peace exists somewhere ahead of them. They think, once this happens, then I will finally relax. Once I achieve this goal, then I will finally feel fulfilled. Once someone chooses me, then I will finally feel loved. But this mentality keeps fulfillment permanently out of reach because the mind continuously moves the destination further ahead. Even after one desire is fulfilled, another appears immediately afterward because the deeper issue was never truly about the object itself. It was about the emotional state connected to it. When you begin experiencing fulfillment inwardly now, before circumstances completely change, you break this cycle. You stop emotionally postponing your life. You stop waiting for permission to feel complete. Instead, fulfillment becomes something you cultivate internally in the present moment. This does not mean you stop having goals or desires. It means your emotional state no longer depends entirely upon them. There is freedom in that. A person who acts from wholeness approaches life differently from someone acting from emotional deficiency. The one acting from deficiency constantly fears loss, rejection, failure, and uncertainty because their identity feels unstable. But the one acting from inner completeness carries a different energy. They can pursue goals passionately without emotionally collapsing when outcomes fluctuate. Their stability comes from within rather than from temporary external conditions. As awareness deepens further, even challenges begin appearing differently. Obstacles are no longer automatically interpreted as signs of failure, punishment, or personal inadequacy. Instead, they become opportunities for awareness. They reveal the emotional states still operating beneath the surface. This is one of the most important transformations that occurs through conscious inner work. Most people react automatically to life. A negative event appears, and immediately an unconscious emotional pattern takes over. Fear rushes in, doubt appears, old assumptions activate without question. The external situation controls the internal state almost instantly, but awareness interrupts this cycle. Instead of reacting unconsciously, you begin pausing. That pause may only last a few seconds, but within it exists enormous power. In that moment, you recognize that you are not obligated to emotionally become every circumstance you encounter. You realize you have the ability to observe the reaction instead of automatically identifying with it. This changes everything. When disappointment appears, you no longer immediately conclude that life is against you. When uncertainty arises, you no longer instantly assume failure is inevitable. When rejection occurs, you no longer automatically define yourself as unworthy. Instead, you begin asking a different question. What feeling is being expressed here? And what feeling would I rather choose instead? That question shifts you from unconscious reaction into conscious creation. The pause between stimulus and response becomes sacred because it is within that space that identity is selected. Most people never realize how often they unconsciously reinforce the very states they wish to escape. They repeatedly return to fear, lack, insecurity, resentment, and limitation because those states feel familiar. The mind interprets familiarity as truth, but awareness allows you to choose differently. You begin recognizing that emotions are not merely reactions to reality, they are also instructions shaping future experience. The feeling you repeatedly return to becomes the atmosphere through which you interpret life itself. If you consistently dwell in fear, you begin perceiving threats everywhere. If you consistently dwell in lack, abundance becomes difficult to recognize even when it exists. If you consistently dwell in unworthiness, you unconsciously filter relationships, opportunities, and experiences through that assumption. But when you consciously return to fulfillment, confidence, peace, love, or certainty, your perception gradually reorganizes itself around those states instead. This does not happen through force. Force creates resistance. It happens through repeated conscious redirection. Every time you notice yourself slipping into an old emotional pattern and gently return to your chosen state, you weaken the old identity and strengthen the new one. Over time, this process stops feeling like a technique and becomes a natural way of being. At first, conscious feeling may require practice because old conditioning has been repeated for years. Fear may feel automatic, doubt may feel familiar, worry may feel normal. But repetition creates identity. Whatever emotional state you consistently occupy eventually begins feeling natural, regardless of whether it serves you or limits you. This is why sustained feeling matters so deeply. Identity is not formed primarily through words. It is formed through emotional repetition. What you repeatedly feel yourself to be eventually becomes your self-concept. If you continually feel powerless, your identity begins organizing around powerlessness. If you continually feel rejected, your identity begins organizing around rejection. If you continually feel supported, capable, loved, and fulfilled, identity reorganizes around those assumptions instead. The emotional state becomes the foundation from which your entire life unfolds. This is why two people can experience similar circumstances but interpret them entirely differently. One sees opportunity while another sees impossibility. One perceives temporary difficulty while another perceives permanent defeat. The difference often lies less in external reality and more in the emotional identity through which reality is being interpreted. Eventually, you realize the greatest power you possess is not found in status, achievement, approval, or external control. True power exists within the emotional state you consistently carry. Most people spend years attempting to control outer conditions while neglecting the inner atmosphere generating their experience. They believe power means forcing reality to obey them, but real power is far quieter than that. It is the ability to remain rooted in a chosen state, regardless of temporary appearances. This is not denial, it is alignment. A person anchored internally in peace experiences life differently from someone anchored in fear. A person anchored in worthiness experiences relationships differently from someone anchored in insecurity. A person anchored in abundance experiences opportunities differently from someone anchored in scarcity. The state determines the experience. Every transformation begins there. You do not become what you occasionally wish for. You become what you consistently feel yourself to be. Desire alone changes little if the emotional identity remains unchanged. A person may desire success while internally feeling incapable. They may desire love while internally feeling unworthy. They may desire freedom while internally identifying with limitation. In such cases, the deeper feeling often overrides the conscious desire because identity always seeks consistency with itself. This is why inner transformation matters more than temporary motivation. Motivation fluctuates. Emotional identity persists. The state you repeatedly accept as true about yourself becomes the blueprint through which your life organizes itself. Once a feeling is accepted deeply enough, reality begins gradually arranging around that assumption. This process often appears mysterious because the mind expects change to occur only through direct force. But life responds in countless subtle ways once identity shifts. Your behavior changes naturally. Your decisions change. Your attention changes. Your perception changes. Your energy changes. The opportunities you notice change. The way others respond to you changes. The situations you tolerate change. The standards you hold change. The risks you are willing to take change. And because all these elements shift together, reality itself begins reorganizing around the new state. At first, the change may seem small. Small differences in reactions. Small differences in confidence. Small differences in emotional stability. But sustained over time, these subtle inner shifts create dramatic external transformation. Eventually, the desired reality no longer feels distant. It begins feeling normal, natural, expected, inevitable. This is one of the clearest signs that a state has truly been accepted. There is less emotional strain around it, less obsession, less desperate longing. The desire stops feeling impossible because internally you are no longer separated from it. The emotional distance collapses first. Most people misunderstand this process because they believe emotional intensity alone creates change. But frantic emotional intensity often comes from attachment and fear rather than alignment. True assumption feels calmer, more stable, more grounded. It carries a quiet certainty. There is less urgency because inwardly the state already feels real. You are no longer trying to convince yourself every moment. You are living from the feeling instead of reaching toward it. This creates enormous inner freedom. You stop constantly checking whether it is working. You stop measuring every moment for evidence. You stop needing immediate confirmation from the outer world because your stability no longer depends entirely upon appearances. You understand that reality often reflects inner change gradually, just as seasons shift gradually, even when transformation has already begun beneath the surface. This understanding changes your relationship with time as well. Most people experience time as pressure. They fear they are falling behind. They worry opportunities are disappearing. They feel anxious about how long change is taking. But when you begin living from the feeling of already being, time loses some of its emotional weight. You stop emotionally postponing your identity into the future. You stop saying, one day I will finally become confident, and begin practicing confidence now. You stop saying, one day I will finally feel worthy, and begin embodying worthiness now. You stop waiting for external permission to occupy the emotional state you desire. And this is where true transformation accelerates. Because the moment you stop separating yourself from the state, you begin allowing life to reorganize around it. This is why the invitation is not to endlessly hope, struggle, or force outcomes into existence. The invitation is to decide. Decide who you are beneath temporary appearances. Decide what emotional identity you are willing to consistently occupy. Decide what state you are no longer willing to abandon every time circumstances fluctuate. Then return to that feeling repeatedly. Not perfectly, not rigidly, but consistently. There will still be moments of doubt. moments of fear, moments where old patterns attempt to reclaim attention. But awareness changes your relationship with those moments. Instead of unconsciously becoming them, you observe them, redirect gently, and return to your chosen state again. Each return strengthens the new identity. Each return teaches the nervous system a different emotional reality. Each return weakens the belief that external circumstances hold ultimate authority over your inner world. Over time, this consistency creates emotional mastery, not control in the rigid sense, but conscious alignment. You become less emotionally reactive because you are no longer unconsciously merging with every passing condition. You recognize that feelings are creative, and therefore you become more intentional about the states you repeatedly nourish. Life begins feeling different from this place. There is more inner space, more calm, more trust, more emotional freedom, less grasping, less panic, less comparison, less dependence upon external approval for a sense of identity. And ironically, it is often from this place of inner completeness that many desired external changes finally begin appearing more fully. Not because you forced them into existence through desperation, but because your state finally became aligned with them naturally. The outer world always reflects the inner relationship you maintain with yourself. If you consistently identify with limitation, life tends to reinforce limitation. If you consistently identify with possibility, worthiness, peace, and fulfillment, life gradually reflects those assumptions back to you as well. This is why your emotional identity matters so deeply. Ultimately, your life will not be shaped most powerfully by what you occasionally wished for, feared, or struggled to achieve. It will be shaped by the emotional atmosphere you repeatedly accepted as true within yourself. That emotional atmosphere becomes perception. Perception becomes behavior. Behavior becomes experience. Experience reinforces identity. And the cycle continues until awareness interrupts it consciously. The moment awareness enters, choice becomes possible. You can continue rehearsing the same emotional identity repeatedly, or you can begin selecting a different state intentionally. You can continue defining yourself through past experiences, or you can choose a new internal relationship with yourself. You can continue waiting for circumstances to grant you peace, worthiness, love, or fulfillment, or you can begin cultivating those states inwardly now. Because the deeper truth is this: your outer world is constantly responding to the emotional identity you carry within. And the emotional identity you sustain today quietly becomes the reality you experience tomorrow.